Welcome classic rock fans to one of those lists again. Today I thought I'd talk about bands that I should love, but just don't. Do you ever find yourself listening diligently to an album or a band in the hope that something's going to click, but you just find yourself more and more irked with every spin? Anyway, if you're new to this channel, please do click like, subscribe and check that notification bell in the words of Steven Tyler so you don't miss a thing. Anyway, let's get into it. This list isn't in any specific order, it's just as they come. Number 10 on my list is Green Day, dismissed as a wanky third-rate outfit by John Lydon. He sees them as imposters, really. I appreciate that many people love this band. I enjoyed Dookie when that came out and played that to death. But I think a lot of people see this band as punk sellouts, especially when they moved from their independent label to their major label, Warner Bros. Actually, it's Reprise, isn't it? I think they signed to. Although the Diamond Seller, the aforementioned Dookie, the album that followed hard upon that was Insomniac, and that was a bloody heavy album. This is just one of those bands where a little goes an awful long way with me. And John Lydon's opinion of this band hasn't changed. Even most recently he described them as silly fat rich kids. Although I have to say my initial enthusiasm for their music has waned considerably. Number 9 is Pearl Jam. My word, their debut album is an extraordinarily good album. It's one that I still play quite often to this day. It's one of those records that defined the 90s as far as I'm concerned. But since then they've never put anything out that kind of matches it. Instead they've embraced this kind of plaid-shirted, sandaled Americana. That is when they're not boring the tits off us with all this a typical millionaire's concern with contemporary politics. They seem to have very much have lost their edge. It's like the anthemic growl of Jeremy has mutated horribly into this kind of mid-American comfort food whine. I'm surprised they haven't done a video of them all sitting on hay bales yet. Number 8 is Def Leppard. I hate Def Leppard, said Robert Smith once. I don't hate them, I just never cared much for their sound production and values. I quite liked Pyromania, I thought that was a good record, I played that one to death. But Hysteria, all the plaudits surrounding that album seemed somewhat hysterical. All those heavy metal cliches wrapped up in the production affectations of the 1980s, all those synths and more cheese than a Papa John's, I think. I think they're best described as a slightly gnarlier version maybe of Foreigner. I can't stand all those heavy vocal processings. That seems to very much define their sound. I think their lowest point was probably Sparkle Lounge, seeing them trying to return to that layered, hooky, neo-glam rock of theirs, recreate the Mutt Lange years, including an ill-fitting duo with country star Tim McGraw. Oh dear. Number 7 is John Lennon, and my God, am I going to take some shit for this. I'm not talking about the stuff he did with the Beatles, which is extraordinary. There's no doubt this man was an immense talent and made a massive contribution to music of the 20th century. But it's his solo stuff. And I'm not just talking about the piffle he put out in the late 60s. Let's start with his albums. The Plastic Ono Band, what a great album that is. A real artistic tour de force, I think. But unfortunately just never matched it. I mean, you take the other album that he's famed for, Imagine. Great title track, A Jealous Guy, which is a reworking of an old Beatles number that he, I think, wrote around about 68, Childhood Nature. But a lot of that album loses the raw intensity we get with Lennon's music because it's buried under all those Phil Spector slatherings. Sometime in New York City is best forgotten, really, just kind of a platforming of his radical left-wing politics. And those other albums, apart from the odd track here and there, it's just largely forgettable. Number 6 is Guns N' Roses. In a word, Axl Rose. I mean, he's been branded an arsehole and a diva by so many people who are probably arseholes and divas themselves, who knows. Nevertheless, this band have dined out on this one great record for so many years now. After that, it's just been a kind of managed dysfunction. Don't get me wrong, I loved Appetite for Destruction when it came out, and I really enjoyed seeing Axl Rose performing with the Stones. Despite the fact that, if we're honest with ourselves, he has a voice like a man who's borne down too heavily upon his own scrotum. Now, that dance thing he used to do, that kind of sidewards crab thing, looked a bit like my nan after a hip replacement. Or indeed myself trying to get up those stairs after that Saturday night jalfrezi has gotten the better of me. I shouldn't say too much against this band as my daughter really loves them, so there you go. But apart from that one album, we've all been hoping for this kind of return to form, but it's perhaps proving that it's just not so easy. Number 5 is the Foo Fighters. I like some of this band's stuff, and I must admit, I think Dave Grohl strikes me as quite a decent chap. But you could probably make a case for this band not being anywhere near as big as they are now if they hadn't risen from the ashes of Nirvana. I just find their music sounds incredibly formulaic to me and uninteresting. Almost, they're kind of like a rock equivalent of a Join the Dots book you used to get for children. There's some great songs built around great riffs that are often hookier than an Ilkley Anglers convention. One of their albums that I did love, which just shows how out of step I am with this band, that is Medicine at Midnight, where they just employed or explored more funkier dance textures. I really like that record, although I think it wasn't that popular with their fan base. I've got a few of their albums upstairs and I do listen to them quite often and hope that something's going to click, but I just don't love it. Number 4 is Nirvana. There was a kind of hysteria surrounding this band that have a legacy that is almost as cemented in as the Pension's Triple Lock, really. You daren't question it. I remember when this album came out, we all played the grooves off it. But listening to it now, it just sounds like a few good songs and an awful lot of filler. I think it's the cover that's more iconic than anything else. A band that stated its reputation on a few good songs and Spencer Eldon's Wiener. Number 3 is Oasis. I've never seen the appeal of this band, a band that's modelled itself on music and artists that were doing it so much better than them 30 years prior. I certainly welcomed that return to guitar-infused pop, as we all traded in the baggy knit, punk-infused nihilism of grunge, and all started wearing parkas overnight, as well as adopting that sort of faux Lennon swagger. And then there was that very theatrical scrap, no doubt engineered by the music press, I guess, but with Blur, of course, if you remember that. I mean, NME billed it as the British Heavyweight Championship, making it sound like Ali versus Fraser. Hyperbole or what? And really it was just a Mancunian oik saying a lot of nasty things about some southern fops, I guess. Noel writes a good tune, credit where credit's due. In fact, I really like the last High Flying Birds album, Council Skies. I think it's a great record. But in terms of Oasis, I just can't see the appeal of them, quite frankly. Number 2 is Radiohead. I mean, if you're a fan of heavily processed cyborg farts, then this is the band for you, I think. Must admit, I love the Bends. Absolutely loved that album. I don't think they've ever done anything as wonderful as Fake Plastic Trees and that record in general. Loved OK Computer, played the grooves off it. But I can't help but agree with Noel Gallagher when he said they don't want people like me listening to their music. Of course, they started exploring all that deep electronica, sort of Kraftwerk, new kind of krautrock vibe going on there. They kind of lost me there. And Tom York is such a brilliant writer and singer, but he leans too much towards all this tuneless whining. Number 1 is Led Zeppelin, and on my word, I'm going to get a lot of shit for this one. I mean, that tight-trousered strut of Robert Plant, all that larynx shredding, they very much set the blueprint for 70s rock, even 80s rock, and the new wave of British heavy metal is so influential. But for me, there's always been something very inauthentic about this band. I can't quite put my finger on it. But whenever I listen to them, I always find myself wishing I was listening to something else. In the pantheon of 70s classic rock, I'd much rather be listening to Mark II, Deep Purple, or even Uriah Heep, to be honest with you. Or Black Sabbath, perhaps. With this band, I have all their albums on my shelf. I mean, I like them. I just don't love them. There you are, that's 10 bands that I should love, but just don't. I'd love to hear from you, though. Leave a comment below, let me know if there are any iconic bands that you just can't get into. Anyway, do share this video if you enjoyed it. Please click like, subscribe, and check that notification bell. Do all that stuff. Other than that, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.